NFL schedule released a couple days ago, but in my timeline, it released just a few minutes ago. And so I wanted to go through and talk about my initial impressions of the NFL schedule release. But before we get into the video, I wanted to take a second to ask you to please subscribe to the channel, ring the bell for notifications. It really helps us out. If you're a fan of the NFL, you'll love this channel as we release multiple NFL-related videos every Tuesday and Friday all year long. Now, let's get back to the video. We're going to begin with the international games, and we're going to start with the Sao Paulo matchup, which is the Green Bay Packers and the Philadelphia Eagles. We've known about this matchup for a little bit of time, but I did not know it was going to be this early in the season. We found out a few days ago that it was going to be early in the season, but it is on the Friday immediately after the Thursday opener. And the Thursday opener is the Ravens at the Chiefs, which should be an absolute banger of a game, followed by the Packers at Eagles, which I think is also a pretty big banger of a game. So the NFL kicking it off with a really big start to the season. I like what they're doing. I like what week one's looking like. And if you're a fan of football down in Brazil, you're going to have one hell of a game. I don't totally understand why this game is happening so early in the season, but in terms of the viewing audience, I'm not mad about it. For the London games, I think it's a little bit of a mixed bag. We have the Jets and Vikings, both of whom I think will compete for a playoff spot, though not sure if either will make. Then we have the Jaguars and Bears, who I think are in the same boat, could compete for a playoff spot, but I'm not sure they will make it to the playoffs. And in the final week, we have the Jaguars again with the New England Patriots, who we all know shouldn't be very good this coming year unless Drake May is, the second coming of CJ Stroud or something. But all told, I think this is a decent slate of games. You don't have many bad teams on the calendar, but you don't have any of the elite teams. Last year, you had the Bills and the Ravens that were going to the London games. You don't have anybody like that. The games are always going to be a little bit better with the Jaguars being a fairly decent team because the Jaguars always go for a game or two. This will be the second straight year that they go for back-to-back weeks and actually have a layover in London, which really helped them in the second week last season. I believe it was against the Bills where they kind of dominated the Bills in that second week after they had stayed playing the Falcons the previous week. If I remember that incorrectly, I'm sorry. If it was the other way around, I apologize, but I think that was the way that it happened. Either way, I do think these games, for the most part, are fairly mid. Now, some of these teams could surprise us. I think the Bears, with a bunch of high draft picks and some good potential pieces, could be a better team than we expect. The Jaguars could bounce back. The Jets and the Vikings could be really good if the Jets have Aaron Rodgers turn back the clock a bit, and the Vikings draft picks in the first round end up being really big contributors to this team, along with the now healthy Justin Jefferson. But at the end of the day, because you don't have the slam dunk guaranteed elite teams, I'm going to call this mid of a schedule. But mid is better than what you got in Munich, because in Munich, you got the Giants and Panthers. If you are a football fan in Germany, I am sorry. There's nothing else to say. I'm just sorry. This is one of the worst matchups you could put on the schedule, and that's what Munich got. You didn't even get a game last year because the Germany games were in Frankfurt. And heck, Frankfurt got the Dolphins and Chiefs for a game, and Munich gets Giants and Panthers. No, this is shit. I'm sorry. Bad choice, NFL, if you're trying to grow in Munich. Also, I don't know why this graphic shows the Madrid game. That doesn't happen until next season, and obviously there's more international games than just the Madrid game next season, but either way, we're moving on from that. So next up, we have the Thursday night football schedule, and it's not on this graphic, but we do start with the Ravens visiting the Chiefs for the opening day of the 2024 NFL season, which should be a fantastic game, rematch of the AFC Championship. I think the Ravens will be coming in looking for revenge, having lost to the Chiefs last year, and I think the Ravens could definitely pull that game off. Obviously, we'll see when we get close to the season how that game's actually going to go, but I think the Ravens are going to be hungry, similar to what the Lions were like last year in that opening day matchup where the Lions were able to beat the Chiefs in Arrowhead, so the Ravens could pull off the same. But after that, we actually have a really good Thursday night football schedule. In week 2, you got the Bills and the Dolphins, which should be a really good matchup. Moving on to week 6, you have the 49ers Seahawks. That's a really good rivalry game. They always put a good product on the field. Then in week 8 and 9, you have some fairly good games, followed by a banger in week 10 with the Bengals and Ravens. That's a fantastic game. Another banger 2 weeks later with the Steelers and the Browns. And another banger 2 weeks later with the Packers and the Lions. Week 13 is not in there because that's Thanksgiving. We'll get into the Thanksgiving Day games later. But then week 15, Rams and 49ers. That's a great game. Week 16, you have the Browns and the Bengals. That's a great game. It seems I'm talking about a lot of really good games, especially in the latter part of the season for Thursday night football. This is one of the best, if not the best Thursday night football slates we've ever seen. And so there's reason to be excited for Thursday Night Football. That being said, there's also a little reason to be pessimistic. And that's because Thursday Night Football is sometimes bad, not because of the matchups, but because teams aren't prepared. The example I'll give you from last year, the Bengals and the Ravens actually played last year on Thursday Night Football. And this was with a healthy Joe Burrow and obviously a healthy Lamar Jackson and Ravens team. And it was kind of a mid-game. And it ended up being a really bad game all told because Joe Burrow got injured in that game. Lamar Jackson got hurt in that game. He did come back, but he left for a bit of time. Mark Andrews left with a long-term injury. And so you have two major players having season-ending injuries from this game. You have a bunch of other stuff going on, and it really wasn't that exciting a game, even though it really looked to be two elite teams from a very competitive division in the AFC North, especially at the time when the Bengals still had Joe Burrow. But again, it was mid. And so sometimes Thursday Night Football just isn't good because the teams aren't prepared. So while this absolutely looks like a fantastic Thursday night schedule, and I'm more optimistic for this Thursday night schedule than any previous year, I'm not going to be totally bought in that Thursday Night Football is going to be great this year because sometimes teams just don't have the ability to adequately prepare on only 4 days rest instead of a full week's rest. Next up, we have the Sunday Night Football schedule, and Sunday Night Football also starts with a banger. I'm going to tell you right now, week 1 of the NFL season is filled with prime time bangers, and this time we have the Lions and Rams. Lions and Rams played in the Super Wild Card weekend this past season. That was far and away the best game of the Super Wild Card weekend. You have Jared Goff and Matt Stafford. That storyline has not gotten old. The Rams are going to want some revenge after losing out to the Lions last postseason. The Lions are still going to want to show that Jared Goff is him and a guy that's worth that $212 million contract they just paid him, and he's not anymore the guy that the Rams gave up on. So still some great storylines, great game here. Moving on, week 4, you have another really good matchup. The Bills and Ravens, two of the AFC's elite. While the Bills could take a bit of a step back, especially with all the cuts they had this year, I still think they'll be a very good team because Josh Allen is still under center, and this should still be a very competitive game. Week 5, you have the biggest chaos matchup of all. You have the Cowboys and Steelers. These are two teams that I always talk about how both can lose to any team on any given week and both can beat any team on any given week. These are the only two teams that fall into that category, and whenever they play each other, it is complete chaos. There is no way to adequately bet that game. It's just going to be fun, so I'm excited to watch that one. Beyond that, you have the Cowboys 49ers week 8. I know the 49ers beat up on the Cowboys this past year, but it could be more competitive this year. I'm hoping it will be at least, but if the 49ers are as dominant as last year, maybe not. But you also have the 49ers and Bills in week 13. That one I'm a little bit more confident being a competitive game. Josh Allen always seems to show up in those tough matchups. Before that, you have the Lions-Texans. That should be a fun matchup. Two very young, exciting teams in the NFL. Texans a bit younger than the Lions, but both are still in that category. Seahawks-Packers in week 15. That should be a good one. And the last game of the Sunday Night Football schedule, Dolphins and Browns, could have massive AFC playoff implications for two teams that are likely going to be fighting for playoff spots towards the back end of the AFC. So all told, this is a decent Sunday Night Football schedule, but my biggest problem with the Sunday Night Football schedule is the lack of rivalry games. Nearly half of these games are going across conference, and only one game, the Chiefs and Chargers, which isn't a very exciting game to begin with, is actually a division rivalry. Literally look at the schedule. No other games are divisional matchups on Sunday Night Football. That's a pretty weak schedule all told when you think of the narratives and the rivalries and the fan bases going at each other. I'd like to see a little bit more of that, but all told, what I think they really focused on in Sunday Night Football is getting good teams. With the exception of the Chargers, who are playing the Chiefs in a rivalry game, and the Giants, I think every team on this schedule has playoff aspirations. Like what you'll notice, you don't have the Panthers, you don't have the Patriots, you don't have the Commanders, you don't have the Titans, you don't have the Raiders, you don't have a lot of these teams that I don't expect to be competing for playoff spots in 2024. As I said before, with the exception of the Chargers and Giants, I think every team on this schedule for Sunday Night Football, their fan base expects them to make the playoffs in 2024. And so it means all told, you have a decent Sunday Night Football schedule, but I'm not sold that the narratives are elite, so it's I. So for our final prime time slot, we have Monday Night Football, and let me just start by saying I hate Monday Night Football doubleheaders. And this year we have 4 of them. 4! Why do we need 4 Monday Night doubleheaders? Like, if you want to put games on at the same time, put it on at 1 o'clock or 4 o'clock Eastern on Sunday when we're all watching Red Zone, or we all can be watching Red Zone and watching a bunch of games at once, along with maybe our teams and the exciting matchups in those time slots. I don't want to watch multiple games in the prime time slots. Those are the times where the NFL should be putting marquee games that they want NFL fans to watch. Yes, I understand that sometimes these games can end up being crap because of injuries, because of some teams being better or worse than we had expectations of. But at the end of the day, the Monday Night Football should not have multiple games. And look at every single one of these doubleheaders. There is one game that just doesn't look exciting to watch. Week 3, the Jaguars and Bills, that seems decent. But the Commanders and Bengals, I'm sorry, the Commanders are not in competition with the Bengals. That's not going to be a great game, I don't think, in anyone's mind. Week 4, you have the Lions-Seahawks. I think that's going to be a fantastic game. These two teams always end up putting up massive barn burner, massive point games every time they play. So I'm excited for that. But Titans aren't completing with the Dolphins in the other slot. Week 7, Buccaneers and Ravens. These teams both won playoff games last year. Yeah, I expect the Ravens to be a lot better, but this is still a decent game. But your other one is the Cardinals and Chargers. Like, the Cardinals is a team I like a lot more than a lot of other people, but I still don't think this is that great a football game to be putting in a primetime slot. And then in week 15, the Vikings and Bears, that could be a really meaningful divisional matchup. But your other game is the Falcons and Raiders. I don't expect the Raiders to be in that much of competition in the AFC. And the Falcons, yeah, they should be decent because they're in the NFC South, but this isn't even a conference rivalry. They're literally opposite conferences. I don't understand why you can't move those 4 games to 4 o'clock or 1 o'clock in the Sunday matchups and just have one primetime game. Okay, either way, I'm done. I'm sorry for the rant. Let's move on and talk about the actual matchups. So starting out, I'm sorry, Jets fans. We have the Jets going to the 49ers, where Aaron Rodgers is back on Monday Night Football playing against Leonard Floyd in the San Francisco 49ers, the guy who injured Aaron Rodgers' Achilles last year in week 1 on Monday Night Football. So Jets fans are going to have to live with that memory for the next 4 months until they see what actually happens on Monday Night Football and Rodgers' first action back. Beyond that, I already talked about the Seahawks-Lions. I think that's going to be a fantastic game. Week 6, Jets and Bills. That was a really good game on Monday Night Football last year, even without Aaron Rodgers. So I expect this could be a very competitive game with Aaron Rodgers in the fold. Moving on past that, I think Week 11, the Texans and Cowboys could be a fantastic game, a battle of Texas. The Cowboys are kind of towards the tail end of what it seems to be this iteration of Cowboys' ability to win. I think they could obviously retool around Prescott, CeeDee Lamb, Micah Parsons, and be a really good team still moving forward. But this iteration under the Mark McCarthy regime seems to be on its last legs compared to the Texans, who are really a team on the come-up. So Battle of Texas, 2 teams in different parts of their compete window, could be really fun. Then I already talked about the Bears and the Vikings. That could be a really important late season matchup for 2 NFC teams looking to compete for a wild card spot or maybe in a division title in the NFC and NFC North respectively. And the Week 17 matchup might be the best of the Monday Night Football matchups. And I'm not just saying that because I'm a Lions fan. It's the Lions and the 49ers, a rematch of the NFC Championship game from 2023. This game was really good in the NFC Championship game. I expect both these teams to be every bit as good, if not better than they were in 2023. Yes, we could have a situation where one of these teams underperforms a little bit. Hopefully not. It could happen. But if it doesn't, this could very well be a matchup that determines who gets the number 1 seed and the bye in the NFC. And so it's going to make this game an absolutely must-watch Monday Night Football matchup. I'm very much so looking forward to that game. Sadly, it's at the end of the season, and we all know what can happen before the end of season matchups. But hopefully it ends up being a really good game. Then moving on past our main primetime slots, let's talk a little bit about our holiday slots. The Christmas Day games on Netflix, because they bought that out apparently in the past couple of days. We have the Chiefs visiting the Steelers and the Ravens visiting the Texans. I think these are both really good football games. I actually think these are both exceptionally exciting football games. You might look at the Chiefs and Steelers as not that exciting, but I talked briefly earlier about how the Steelers are just a team that can beat any team on any given day. And then in the other matchup, you have the Ravens and Texans, both teams that are definitely looking to compete in 2024. So these are great matchups. Now, I would slightly prefer if the Steelers and the Texans swapped and we got a Ravens-Steelers matchup and then the Chiefs and the Texans. I think that would be a little bit better, but I think all these teams are really good matchups for Christmas Day. They all made the playoffs last year. They're all exciting teams. They're all teams that can be very competitive, very hard-nosed football. So really good Christmas Day schedule. Nothing I'm going to complain about here. And finally, we move on to our Thanksgiving Day schedule. And the Thanksgiving Day schedule also looks decent. I think Lions and Bears is a really good Thanksgiving Day schedule. Remember, the Lions are always going to host the 1 o'clock Thanksgiving Day game. It's usually a rivalry game, and you got a good rivalry game here with the Bears. Last year, the Packers came to town. I don't think the NFL wanted to double back on that. And so bringing the Bears is a team that makes a lot of sense. An exciting, young football team that has always put up good matchups against the Lions, even when the Bears weren't very good this past year and the Lions were quite good. The Bears competed very well against the Lions, so I expect this to be a very good matchup. Giants-Cowboys leaves a lot to be desired, but hey, you can't win all of them. And then the night matchup, the Dolphins and the Packers, is not really that great a matchup in terms of the rivalries, but in terms of the football on the field, I'm actually kind of excited for this. This is a game I looked at and I was like, oh. And then I thought about it a bit more and I'm like, oh. Because I think both these teams are hyper offensive and exciting football teams. This could be an absolute gunslinging showdown on Thursday night of Thanksgiving and could be a lot of fun while all the Americans, not myself because I'm Canadian, are having their turkey comas, lying on the couch, watching football. I think that could be a really fun game for everyone to watch, so I'm all on board with it. The final game that's not on this graphic, because it wasn't on any graphics that I could find, is the Black Friday game, which is the Chiefs and the Raiders. While that doesn't look on paper to be the most exciting game, the Chiefs and Raiders always play each other competitively. It's a really big rivalry over in the AFC West. Those two teams do not like each other, and the Raiders were able to beat the Chiefs one time last year, even with how much better the Chiefs were than the Raiders, at least on paper. So that could be a really exciting game on Black Friday. So all told, the Thanksgiving matchup, sans the Cowboys-Giants game, seems like a pretty good weekend for football on Thanksgiving weekend. So that's it for my NFL schedule release initial analysis. At the time you're watching this, this will have been released for a couple days now, but I'm literally reacting to it as it comes out when I'm filming this. I hope you all enjoyed this video. If you did, please remember to like and subscribe to the channel and leave a comment below on what you like about this video and what you want to see more of. Either way, I'll see you all next time. Peace!